See you in the next lecture.
Is the fear of having to pay out for endless equipment, tools and One of the things that scares parents about having a creative child is the fear of having to pay out for endless equipment, tools and resources. While it is true that you can never have enough paint or too many brushes, they're not essential to creativity. That may sound like a bit of a contradiction, but it's true, and as you'll discover in this section, you most likely already have most of the things you need to foster creativity in your child. What do you think are the most important things you need to foster creativity in your own children? The answer to this question should be relatively simple. Yes, you are the most important thing that your child needs, followed by time, space, encouragement and enthusiasm. But these all boil down to you. It's up to you to create the environment where creativity is possible. And I reiterate again, it's not about buying things. In the first part of this section, we're going to talk about creating creative spaces. This is going to be a practical guide to how you can use the space and time you have to approach creative exploration with encouragement and enthusiasm. Now, whether you live in a one-bedroom flat or a 16-room mansion, there's a space for creativity. You just need to find it. So your first task is to draw a floor plan of your home. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be a quick sketch in a notebook or on the back of an envelope. I'm not asking for a scale drawing exactly, just a basic outline of your home, including different floors, and these can be on different sheets of paper. Next, write down for each space what it's used for. Not the name of the room, but what it's used for. So, for example, the kitchen, instead of writing kitchen, you would write cooking, eating, washing up, washing clothes, feeding animals, etc. In the bathroom, you might write down bathing, washing, and going to the bathroom. You don't need to be too specific here. I know it seems strange, but bear with me. Once you have done this, I want you to circle all the activities that could be considered creative. These could be obvious things such as cooking, reading, playing computer games. Yes, even computer games count, sometimes. But once you start thinking about it, you'll see that there are less obvious creative moments as well. Depending on the age of your child, you may still bathe them. But do they play with bubbles or toys in the bath? Do you interact during this time? Do you make believe here? And what about their bedroom? Do you tell stories, hunt for the cupboard monster, or make tents out of the bedclothes? Even if you do only a fraction of these things, or none of them, but have your own personal list of small creative interactions, you're already on the right road towards using the space you have. Time. It's a strange thing that we never seem to have enough of it, but at the same time, we're very good at wasting it. Sound familiar? How many hours do you spend doing things that seem important, but that could be left or could be approached differently, freeing up more time to make the most of your space? Of course, I'm not advocating not doing chores. That's a very personal thing. However, what I'm suggesting is that you take a look at how you use your time in the different spaces of your home. The best way to do this is to keep a time diary for just a day. Now, it may seem a bit tedious at the time, pardon the pun, but it's going to be worth it. So note down everything you do and the time that it takes. There'll be gaps in your time diary, and those are the parts that we're most interested in. So for example, if you get up at 7 a.m. and get the children or your child up at 7:30, leave for school at 8:15, and the next time you look at your watch, it's 10:30, try to think about what you did in that time. There'll be gaps that are easy to explain, and others not so much. There'll be surprises as well, such as it literally taking 15 minutes to find your purse or wallet that you know you left somewhere sensible, or an accumulated time of an hour on the phone telling different companies that you don't have PPI to claim for. Once you have completed a time diary for the day, highlight or circle the wasted or lost time. What could you do in those times instead that would free up your time to be creative with your child? For example, using a call minding service or simply not answering unknown numbers could mean an extra 10 minutes at bedtime to read a story, play a game, or draw with bubbles on the bathroom tiles. Checking the amount of hair in the rollers of the vacuum before you start hoovering could save you 30 minutes while you wait for the motor to cool down after it starts burning out from all the accumulation of hair. This time could be used later to create a maze or spider web with a ball of string, the banister rail and some door handles. But we're starting to stray into the next session now. In the previous lecture, two very important points were made. Firstly, that creativity can happen anywhere, and secondly, that it doesn't have to cost a fortune. The child that creates a picture with mud and a stick is just as creative as the child that uses paints and a paintbrush, if not more so if they chose the medium and the tools themselves. I am reiterating this point because it's so very important. Too often, parents are put off exploring new ideas with their children because each idea comes with a list of must-haves. This is not the point of this course, and at any stage where one item is suggested, it is more than likely that something else can be substituted in its place, such as the stick for the paintbrush. So, bearing that in mind, what do you think a basic creative kit needs to include? Spend a few moments listing what you would put in such a kit, basing your choices as much as possible on the work we've done so far. I'll give you a little hint here. This is much easier if you return to your room plan and create one kit per room, plus an outdoor or garden kit. When you're ready, it's time to start comparing kits. Now mine is in no way exhaustive or right, it is merely a suggestion, a place to start. As you move through your creative journey with your child, your kit will change. It will change to better reflect the interests and ideas of your child, and just as importantly, the things you enjoy doing together. The parents that I know with creative children always seem to have at least these things in their kitchen: flour, corn flour, water, salt, oil, rice, pots and pans, wooden spoons, and empty plastic bottles. Now you're probably thinking, but doesn't every kitchen have those? Well, that is the key to engaging a child's creativity. Taking something ordinary and doing something different with it. So, given that, before we go on to the next room, I want you to think of 3 different uses or activities you and your child could do with just the items on this list. Don't continue with this lecture until you've thought of and written down at least 3. Now, if this is the first time you've tried to take a list of seemingly random items and tried to create activities out of them, then the chances are you made that more way complicated than it needed to be. Although I'm sure your activities are going to be great fun. Here are 3 very simple ideas that you could try. The first, gloop prints. Corn flour and water mixed together create a substance commonly referred to as gloop. It's amazing stuff that you will find yourself playing with even when the children aren't there. It has the capacity to be both solid and liquid, and when it dries out and separates, the water can be poured off and the remaining powder simply thrown in the bin. But in the meantime, it is a sensory experience that you cannot surpass. Place either your hands or your feet in a tray of gloop and make a trail for your child to follow. Use your hands in different shapes to do this and pretend it is an animal trail. Because it dries so quickly, it's easy to brush off the tiles and most other flat surfaces. Number 2, start a band. Rice in a plastic bottle makes a shaker. It's an old one, but it's great. Vary the amount of rice to change the sound. And, of course, pots, pans and wooden spoons make the perfect drum kit. Number 3, making dough. Flour, oil, salt and water are all you need to make homemade dough. Have fun with it. Wrap it and put it in the fridge for another day, or bake it and create a whole new set of things to play with later. The bathroom kit follows the same lines as the kitchen one. Look for things that have a dual purpose that you already have or which can be purchased cheaply and used time and time again. So here are a few of my suggestions. Bubble bath, plastic jugs, empty bottles, hand soap or bars of soap, and old toothbrushes. Now it's over to you. What would you do with these things? Try to think of 2 or 3 things that you and your child could try together, either at bath time or just using in the bathroom. By now, you should be starting to see a pattern emerging, so I'm going to leave you to create your own bedroom list. But I would suggest that an old sheet is on the list somewhere. I can see you're getting the hang of this now, so use the same approach for the other areas of your home. In addition to the lists you create for each room, here are some items that I would suggest you have at hand somewhere. Kitchen roll and empty tubes, empty cereal boxes, string or wool, scraps of material. This could be anything from old socks to leftover dressmaking fabric, and scissors, glue and tape. Of course, the list could go on, but this should be enough to get you started. So, before the next lecture, start creating your kits. You don't need to keep these things together. How you store them is entirely up to you. Just know where they are when you need them. Oh, and one more thing. Try out at least one of your kits in an activity with your child. I say at least one. Of course, what I really mean is go wild and try as many as possible. Developing creativity in children takes many forms. After all, no 2 children are the same, a point any parent with more than one child will happily attest to. As parents, you need to be able to adapt the environment and tools you provide for your child to meet their developing creativity and creative needs. Artistic expression in its many forms is often seen as the key to unlocking a child's creativity, but it's not the only way. Early on in this course, we discussed how one of the earliest outward forms of creative expression was a child's ability and desire to ask why. In this one word, they are expressing their desire to know more about the world around them and how their presence affects that environment. Asking the question makes it real. It brings the thought out into the world. What follows it depends on how it's answered, if it is answered, and the questions that follow it. In this scenario, creativity is a search for better answers and newer questions. But is there more to creativity than this? One word that is often used in the place of creativity is imagination, or being imaginative. But are they really the same thing? Spend a few moments thinking about this and note down your thoughts. So, imagination, or being imaginative, is to do with ideas, thoughts and concepts. It is what happens in the mind and is only limited by a combination of your own ability to think something and your experience. For example, imagining what it is like to fly an aeroplane will be difficult if you don't know what an aeroplane is. You have no experience. But that doesn't mean you cannot imagine what an aeroplane might be. Creativity is action. It takes the thoughts and brings them into the world. It is creative in the sense that it has an effect, however slight, on the world around you, or your child for that matter. And in that lays the major differences between the two. I can imagine a world where no one goes hungry, but unless I develop that thought into an action, it will never become a reality. But Is it possible to have creativity without imagination? What do you think? Try to do something creative without firstly picturing it in your mind. Or consider something you do that changes the world for the better. Why do you do it? How did the idea first come to you? Did it start by imagining or thinking about that better world? So if creativity and imagination are different but linked, then how do you move from thought to action? As we said at the beginning, that will greatly depend on the child. However, play in any of its forms is always a good place to start, and dolls and dressing up are perfect examples. And the best thing about these play options is that you and your child can let your imagination go wild and your creativity will naturally follow. Playing with dolls is not just for girls, and nor is it just for very young children, and the rise in action figures and fashion dolls has helped to widen the appeal of this timeless pastime. However, this doesn't mean you need to rush out and buy the latest models to be able to create a great game. Dolls can come from anywhere: jumble sales, school fetes, charity shops, and dollar stores. These are just some of the places that you can find dolls of varying shapes, sizes, and potential uses. The doll matters far less than you do. The key to creativity through dolls, or dressing up, is the willingness of the adult to get on the floor and interact. The best way to explain the role that dolls can have is with a real-life example. The child in question is a little girl of nearly 10, an only child who has high-functioning autism. She has a good vocabulary and can express her needs, but has difficulties understanding some of the subtleties of language, turn-taking, and the emotional needs of others. She enjoys online worlds, which we come on to later, and watching YouTube videos, particularly those that involve making over different toys. Noting this, her mum watched a video with her and happened to mention the big box of dolls that were rarely played with. Between them, it was decided that it was okay for the child to make over an older doll that she had a newer version of. The little girl completed the makeover, turning the doll into one of her favourite characters, Harley Quinn. On completion, the child assigned character names, all associated with Harley Quinn, to other dolls, and, with her mum, reenacted scenes from the film in which they all appeared. Over a period of time, other dolls underwent makeovers too. Varying degrees and storylines developed away from simply repeating those of the film. The characters were then used in completely unrelated storylines that the child created, and her mum encouraged by taking on characters and voices as requested. With some gentle guidance from her mum, the child was able to explore relationships, emotions, and uses of language through play, while also finding answers to other questions and developing her conversational and turn-taking skills. So in this example, you can see how the child had the imaginative processes and how the combination of access to dolls, a willing parent, and YouTube as a catalyst were able to work together to provide a situation where the imagination could be actualized and become a creative process. Can you think of a situation with your own child, or a situation you have witnessed with another child, where a toy on its own or in a combination with another tool has been the bridge between the imagination and creativity? If so, I'd like you to make a note of this now. If you cannot think of an example that you've seen or been a part of, then consider your child and the things that they're interested in. How could you work with this to encourage them to step beyond imagination and into creativity? If you don't already play dolls with your child, then give it a go between now and the next lecture, and the same goes for dressing up. If your child is of nursery or school age, then the chances are they have had at least one mufti day. That's fancy dress day with donations going to a cause. Regardless of the theme that the school chooses, children will still, more often than not, choose to dress as a favourite character or in their favourite colours. costumes or favourite clothes from home. Children feel comfortable in things that are familiar, just as they are more comfortable in familiar places and with familiar people. The problem is that creativity doesn't grow from familiarity. As we've already seen, it comes from questions and challenges to what is already known, and that is where you, the parent, comes in. If you want your child to do something different, to step beyond the comfortable, you need to lead by example, even if it's only behind closed doors at home. So what does this mean in practical terms? The same as with dolls, to use dressing up as a bridge between imagination and creativity, you need to be willing to join in. So regardless of whether your son or daughter wants to play warriors or tea parties or warrior tea parties and passes you a pink hat and a Minecraft sword, embrace the role and join in. It doesn't matter how silly you might feel. By doing this with your child is learning that it is okay to have fun, to create different personas, and to explore different elements of their own personalities, as well as trying on those of others. Remember, creativity is not just about finding answers, it's also about finding out what questions need to be asked. So, while you're sipping tea from the plastic skulls of the enemies of your child's kingdom, or riding a unicorn through lakes of sugar, consider what questions they're asking and what answers they are finding without even realizing they're learning.